1. Loomings. Call me Ismail. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse, and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It is a word I have of driving off the splun and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I met, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me, that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodologically knocking people's hats off. Then I account it high time to get a seat as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. With a philosophical flourish, Canto throws himself upon his sword. I quietly take to the ship. There is nothing surprising in this, if they but I knew it. Almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings toward the ocean with me. There now in your insular city of the Manhattans, belted round by wharves as Indian isles by coral reefs. Commerce surrounds it with a surf. Right and left the streets take you waterward. It extremely downtown is a battery where that notable mole is washed by waves and cooled by breezes which a very few hours precisely were out of sight of land. Look at the crowds of water grazers there. Circumambulate the city of a dreamy Sabbath afternoon. Go from Corliss Hook to Colony Slip, and from thence by Whitehall north landward. What do you see? Postal-like silent sentinels all round the town. Stand thousands upon thousands of mortal men fixed in ocean reveries. Some leaning against the spiles, some seated upon the pierheads, some looking over the bulwarks of ships from China, some high aloft in the rigging, as if striving to get a still better seaward peep. But these are all landsmen of weekdays pent up in lead and plaster, tied to encounters, nailed to benches, clenches to desk. How then is this? Or the green fields gone? What do they have? But look, here come more crowds, pacing straight for the water, and seemingly bound for a dive. Strange, nothing will content them but the extremest limit of the land. Loitering under the shabby lee of yonder warehouses will not suffice. No, they must get just as nigh the water as they possibly can without falling in. And there they stand, miles of them leagues. Inlanders all, they came from the lands and alleys, streets and avenues, north, east, south and west. Yet, here they all unite. Tell me, does the magnetic virtue of the needle of the compass of all those ships attract them either? Once more, say you are in the country, in some high land of lakes. Take almost any port you please, and 10 to 1 it carries you down in a dale, and leaves you there by a pool in the stream. There is a magic in it, let the most absent-minded of men be plunged in the deepest reveries. Stand that man on his legs, set his feet a going, he will infallibly lead you to water. If water there be in all that region, should you ever be at rest in the great American desert? And he will infallibly lead you to water. If water there be in all that region, should you ever be at rest in the great American desert, try this experiment if you crave and happen to be supplied with a metaphysical professor. Yes, as everyone knows, meditation and water are better forever. But here is an artist, he desires to paint you the rarest, shadiest, quietest, most enchanting bit of romantic landscape in all the valley of the Skew. What is the chief element he employed? There stand his trees, each with the hallowed trunk of the hermit and crucifix where within, and here sleeps his meadow, and here sleep his cattle, and up from the outer cottage goes a smoky smoke. Deep into distant woodlands winds a massive way, reaching to overlapping spurs of mountains bathed in their hillside blue. But though the picture lies thus tranced, and though this pine tree shakes down its eyes like bees upon his shepherd head, yet all were vain, unless the shepherd eye were fixed upon the magic stream before him. Go visit the Palace in June, when for scores on scores of miles you wade knee deep down among Greiger lilies. What is the one charm wanting? Water? There is not a drop of water there. Where Niagara but a cataract of sand? Would you travel your 1,000 miles to see it? Why did the poor poet of Tennessee, upon suddenly receiving 2 handfuls of silver, deliberately whether to buy him a coat which he sadly needed or invest his money in a pedestrian trip to Rockaway Beach? Why is almost every robust healthy boy with a robust healthy soul in him at some time or other crazy to go to sea? Why upon your first voyage as a passenger did you yourself feel such a mystical vibration? When first told that you and your ship were now out of sight of land, why did the old Persians hold the sea holy? Why did the Greeks give it a separate deity and own brother of Jove? Surely all this is not without meaning, and still deeper the meaning of that story of Narcissus. You, because he could not grasp the tormenting, mild image he saw in the mountain, plunged into it and was drowned, but that same image we ourselves see in all rivers and oceans, it is image of the ungraspable phantom of life, and this is the key to it all. Now, when I say that I am in the habit of going to sea whenever I begin to grow gassy about the eyes and begin to be overconscious of my lungs, I do not mean to have it inferred that I ever go to sea as a passenger. For to go as a passenger, you must needs have a purse, and a purse is but a rag unless you have something in it. Besides, passenger gets seasick, grow quarrelsome, don't sleep of nights, do not enjoy themselves much. As a general thing, no, I never go as a passenger, nor though I am something of a sort, do I ever go to the sea as a comrade, or a captain, or a cook. I abandon the glory and distinction of such offices to those who like them. For my part, I abominate all honorable respectable toils, trials, and tribulations of every kind whatsoever. It is quite as much as I can do to take care of myself without taking care of ships, barks, brigs, schoolness, and what not. And as for going as cook, I confess there is considerable glory in it. A cook being a sort of officer or shipboard, yet somehow I never fascinate broiling fowls, though once broiled, judiciously buttered, and judgmentally salted and pepper, there is no one who will speak more respectfully and to say reverently of a broiled fowl than I will. It is out of the outrageous doting of the old Egyptians upon broiled abyss and roasted river hares, and to see the memories of those creatures in their huge black houses, the pyramids. No, when I go to sea, I go as a simple sailor. Right before the mast pumped down into forecastle, I looked that to be the royal masthead. True, they rather order me about some and make me jump from spar to spar like a grasshopper in a meadow. And at first this sort of thing is unpleasant enough. It touches one's sense of honor, particularly if you come of an old established family in a land, the Van Rensselaers or Randolphs or Hardicans, and more than all, if just previous to putting your hand into the tot pot, you have been loading it as a country schoolmaster, making the tallest boy stand in awe of you. The transition is a keen one, I assure you, from a schoolmaster to a sailor, and requires a strong decoration of Seneca and the statics to enable you to grin and bear it. But even this wears off in time. What of it if some old hunks of a sea captain orders me to get a broom and sweep down the decks? But what does that indignity amount to? Wait, I mean, in the scales of the New Testament, do you think the original grabber thinks anything the less of me? Because I promptly and respectfully obey that old hunks in that particular instance, who aren't a slave. Tell me that well then, however the old captains may order me about, however they may hump and punch me about, I have the satisfaction of knowing that it is all right, and everybody else in one way or other served in much the same way, either in a physical or metaphysical point of view. That is, so the universal thump is passed round and all the hands should rub each other's shoulder blades and be content again. I always go to sea as a sailor, because they make a point of paying me for my trouble, whereas they never pay passengers a single penny that I ever had heard of. On the contrary, passengers themselves must pay, and that is always the difference in the world between paying and being paid. The act of paying is perhaps the most uncomfortable infliction that the two orchard thieves entangled upon, but being paid, what will compare with it? The urban activity with such a man receives money is really marvelous, considering that we earnestly believe money to be roast of all earthly ills, and that on no account can be moneyed men ever enter heaven. Oh, how cheerfully we consign ourselves to perdition. Finally, I always go to sea as a sailor, because of the wholesome exercise and pure air of the forecastle deck. For as in this world, headwinds are far more prevalent than winds from astern, so for the most part the comrade on the quarter deck gets his atmosphere at second hand from the sailors on the forecastle. He thinks he breaches it first, but not so. In much the same way do the comfortability lead their leaders in many other things, at the same time that the leaders little suspect it. But therefore it was that, after having repeatedly smelled the sea as a merchant sailor, I should now take it into head to go on whaling voyage. Thus the invisible police officer on the fates, who has the constant surveillance of me, and secretly dogs me, and influences me in some unaccountable way, he can better answer than anyone, and doubtless may, going on the whaling voyage, form part of the grand program of Providence that was drawn upon a long time ago. It came in as a sort of brief interlude and solo between more extensive performances. I take it that the part of the bill must have run something like this. Okay friends, I will continue this first part looming in the next video. See you, bye.